Hello, and welcome to this next video in our Genesis series. We're going to be looking tonight at Genesis 1, 4, and 5. And as we get into this particular session, we're going to be looking at the fact that God divided uh, the light from the darkness and all the interesting characteristics of that concept. And so we're going to just jump right in and let's get started. So we see here that as we get into Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, we see that God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And so here we're talking about the light that he manifested into the earth domain. Remember, the darkness is already present. He created it as per Isaiah 45, verse 7. And he did that to protect his creation from his unbearable presence in a construct where there was going to be us as mortal frame beings confronted with a free will choice to be in relationship with him or not. And so as he is making the construct for us to exist within, light is manifest from him into this earth domain. And as you saw when we started the video, you could see that um, when a greater light is present, the other lights tend to diminish in seemingly diminish in intensity. And the greater light just envelops them and makes their light seem as though um, it's very weak or even dark by comparison. And so as we tried to model that there in another object lesson with our title screen, we see that God's light is supreme. We also know from 1 John 1:5, as we talked about last time, um, this then is the message we have heard of him and declare unto you that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. And so when you have this ultimate light directly from God, God shining forth this ultimate perfect truth and perfect uh, ultimate light, there can be no darkness that can withstand that incredible light. And we see here that God is also taking shape the first day. And so as this first day is taking shape, remember there's a lot here happening, more than most people realize. On day one, we already have two domains, the heaven domain and the earth domain. We already have a shroud of darkness um, surrounding the third heaven, the domain where God dwells. And then we have within the earth domain, in its formless and empty state, it's just the construct only. And so within that construct, we already have the elements, we already have water is already present, the deep. We already have property or characteristic of darkness. And now we have a measure of his light, which he has manifest into the earth domain, and he is forming that to take shape over the course of a day. And that's what we're going to look at here in verse 5, where it says, and God called the light day. So he gives it a label. And this gives us a clue. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And then it goes on to say, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And so that gives us a huge clue here that we know that the sun isn't present until day 4. And that is very interesting because it gives a hint or a shadow of something that I cover in the book Creation's Week, a macrocosm of Creation Week that we have here. Um, and it gives us a clue and a hint of that, that as we see the light um, be the label for day or daytime, and we have the night as a label for dark or the nighttime, and then we see a process where the light is um, the evening, Erev, and Boker, the morning. We have a process of darkness transitioning into day and day transitioning into darkness. And this evening and morning process, we see this day type compartment of time that God created, that we are to live each day in this understanding that there's 12 hours of darkness, there's 12 hours of day. But what happens on the fourth day? We see that the sun, moon, and stars come into being at God's command. And it's a picture or a type that as we have um, God and all attributes and aspects of God are there from the very beginning, but we don't see that actually manifest until the fourth day. And what it's a picture of is the fourth millennium or the fourth thousand uh, period of time of 1,000 years. That's when we actually see the Son of God come into the creation and be the light, be the true light, be the truth um, to the world. And so, just like you see the lights in the heavens that we don't actually see until the fourth day, which we talk about starting here in Genesis 1:14, and we'll go over this part in more detail once we get there. But we see that take shape on the fourth day, and in the fourth millennium, that's exactly when Christ comes on the scene to shine forth God's light to humanity in the way that He showed us how to live, showed us His um, characteristics, showed us the Father through Him in the flesh. And so, as we see all that take place, I thought of another interesting analogy, and that is this concept that scientists talk about. And still, there's no absolute um, conclusion on this because it's puzzled physicists and scientists for ages. And in this last 100 years or so, when they really started looking into it at a deep level and at the micro level and the macro level, and we saw these brilliant scientists, Max Planck, Albert Einstein, and all the rest of them, um, Louis de Broglie, and all these players who are trying to get their heads around this concept of whether light is a wave or is it a particle, and or is it both, and that has ever since quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and the whole study of that field has come into view during the 20th century and now into the 21st century. Uh, you could see that there's this dualistic view of light, that it's both a wave and a particle in some way, and they're not still to this day not quite exactly sure how all that works and how all that is reconciled. Because does it behave like a wave or does it behave like a particle? Well, if you think of a wave, you might think of waves are thought of in the sense of being very ethereal, very non-physical. They permeate, waves permeate physical substance, and we think of the electromagnetic spectrum. When we think of light, we're thinking usually of a small little sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and but that electromagnetic spectrum is made up of all kinds of other waves that are not visible. So you have everything from radio waves all the way up to X-rays and gamma rays are all part of this electromagnetic electromagnetic spectrum, um, and only a small little sliver of that is what we would see as actual visible light. Well, if you think about the physical attributes of light being a wave and being very ethereal, very if you'll allow me to say this, very spiritual in the sense of being um, permeating and not being really subject to physical properties, like waves are traveling through each of us right now as we speak. Um, and yet particles are something that are physical in nature, and they have a physical impact on physical substance. And so when you have light in terms of a physical particle, like a photon, then you can think of this concept again in 1 John 1:5, where it says, "This then is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." Well, if we think of light in terms of the electromagnetic spectrum being waves and particle, well, what do we have in John 4:24? We have it's the scripture that says God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And at the same time, you also have God in the flesh in Jesus Christ, physical presence. You actually have a physical manifestation of God in the flesh. The Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. And so you have, again, you see that light has properties of both the physical characteristic and the spiritual characteristic, just like God has the spiritual aspect of himself, and yet he chose to take on flesh to dwell amongst us and represent himself in a physical construct at the same time. So again, we see light going all the way back to the very beginning in Genesis. We see that there's these echoes of God even in the very makeup and the very characteristics and the nature of physical light in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's a representation again of Him. And so when I thought about that, I thought that was um, pretty revolutionary there, concept and understanding. And when we continue to look at this, we also think about now these time units, the time units of a 24-hour day cycle. And so a lot of people have a problem with that because, again, we talked last time about the billions of years and how to reconcile that and how felonious that is. And you can go back and watch the last video on Genesis 1:3 if you want all the details of that. But a lot of people have this problem of, well, could God have created the universe in 6 24-hour days? Well, if you're talking about Genesis 1, that's not the place where you determine that because people try to play around with this all day long. They'll say all kinds of things that these were um, ages and these were long ages of time, or even I've heard more clever arguments, which I used to kind of adhere to a little bit. I thought of this possibility as being um, very compelling, and that is, well, if God is intersecting with his creation, and we know that time is relative to mass and acceleration, as per the general relativity, E equals mc squared, well, then what's God's mass and what's his acceleration as he's creating the universe? And just the very fact that um, he's the one that stretches out the heavens, as it says in Scripture a number of times, and his physical presence within his creation, well, that would therefore um, warp what we might say warp the our sense of space and time, because his intersection with his creation during the time when he was creating it would warp our sense of time because his mass and acceleration are going to be so massive that it's going to skew the scale of what we see. And I went with that theory for a while. However, it has a huge problem staring at it, staring down at it, and that is um, actually found in Exodus chapter 20. So this is where the Ten Commandments are being given. And in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, you'll see it says this: "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day." Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay. Well, right there, whenever you see a cardinal number like this, directly related to the Hebrew word for day, right here, and you see that in combination with each other, there's never a time where that means anything other than a literal 24-hour day. Never. And so that's really your problem. If you're going to try to say, oh, the days really mean long spaces of time, or relativity or whatever else, um, you really have a big problem here with Exodus 20 trying to take that view. And so if you come back here, let's look at Genesis 1:5. We're going to go to our tools and break this down. Notice it says, and God called the light day. And right here you have it. That's the Hebrew word yom. It's Strong's H3117. That's the Hebrew word for day. And then you see this, and the darkness he called night. That's Layil. Um, that's Strong's H3915. And the evening, Erev, and the morning, Boker, were the first day. Yom. Again, 31:17. So here you see the word day is used in two contexts. One is in the context of being speaking of the daytime, like the 12 hours of daylight, and then you have it here spoken of as the fullness of the evening and the morning, meaning the full 24-hour period or the full 24-hour day that we understand and are still operating within down to this very day. And so when you have those concepts there, we're going to see that if you look in Exodus 20, we can see this. It says, for in 6, okay, that's the Hebrew word for 6 right there. Days, notice here you have it, H3117, the Hebrew word yom. And that makes it very, very clear that we are talking about 6 literal 24-hour days that God formed and shaped and created everything within. And this first 24-hour period is where he distinguished the light from the day, the light, and labeled it day, and then distinguished the light from the darkness by labeling the darkness night. And you have this first period of time of day and night. Now, very interestingly, the sun, moon, and stars weren't there yet, just like God wasn't manifest in flesh yet during the first 4,000 years. And so that doesn't mean that day and night still weren't operating during these first 3 days that take place. Day and night were operating, and they were operating just as they operate today. It's just that they weren't being governed by the sun, moon, and stars like they are today and like they were starting with the fourth day, because God had a very specific prophetic reason in which, for the reason in which that He did that. Because when the light manifested and actually took shape in flesh, that's going to be correlated to the day of creation, where God made the sun, moon, and stars on the fourth day, just like in the fourth millennia, God brought forth his Son, Jesus Christ, manifest in flesh, to be amongst us. And so when you see all these technical aspects take shape and these technical aspects of creation take shape with the prophetic purpose for them happening on these specific days, that's when this whole picture starts to come into clearer and sharper focus. So, um, again, this is, and God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And so here we have, in these last several sessions here, we finally wrapped up the first day of Genesis. Uh, Next time, we will be looking at the firmament, and we will be trying to get through um, the whole second day in one session. So that's going to be Genesis 1:6 through Genesis 1:8. We're going to talk about the firmament and the waters above and the waters below and how all that works and what it speaks to prophetically. And we'll also be talking about some of the technical aspects of it as well. So I hope you're continuing to enjoy this series as much as I'm enjoying putting it together and presenting it to you. And may God be glorified and may He receive all the praise, honor, and glory. And we will continue next time. God bless you, and we'll see you here, there, in the air, or in the next video.